Hello, I'm Soycat, and young people are fleeing Britain. That is the headline from many right-leaning sources across the UK, like this one from The Spectator. They actually do back it up with some data, though, that shows that every age group, besides 55 plus, are people leaving the UK more than coming into it, resulting in 109,000 more British citizens leaving the country than returning. This would be a major crisis for many countries, but obviously when it comes to population or GDP growth, we'll technically be fine because our net migration figure is so high, and you might even argue that if the UK loves immigrants so much, which over the last 5 years we've decided we have, then actually so many British people going out and becoming immigrants is a really good thing. But you're forgetting that that is, every immigrant coming to the UK is someone who is seeking a better life, and suddenly lots of British people have decided that they should seek a better life elsewhere unless they are above the age of 55. What exactly is behind that? Let's talk about brain drain and emigration today. So first things first, you can see the incentive system of the UK working as intended here, because as people over the age of 55 return to the UK, that shows us the classic immigrant story that people would like to believe, that people like to go elsewhere to work during their working age years, and then they come home to retire when family becomes more important. This is something that's fine by itself, but it represents a problem in our incentive structure in the UK, because if you look at our budget, this is from 2023, so it's about 20% higher now, our biggest line items outside of other over here are health and social security. Social security for pensioners specifically, by the way, we spend another 10% on everyone else. We spend more on pensioners than working age and children combined, but we spend more on social security for pensioners than transport, defense, and public order and safety combined. All of those categories are nothing compared to what we spend on social security. So if you come to the UK at age 65 and you have your pension credits, or even if you just pay for them, then all of a sudden you're entitled to a huge amount of money. It's 200 something billion pounds a year every single year that the UK spends on giving that money out. That's kind of rough. Okay, that's sure, that's crazy. But then also our health care works very flat in the UK. Instead of a lot of people think like, man, I'm not clarifying that I am against healthcare that is free at the point of use. I love it. Please don't shoot me. That is a thing that can get you hung in the UK if you say anything bad about the NHS. But if you actually think, if you look at the way that per capita spending works, is you have really high expenses when you're super young and really high expenses when you're super old. And working age people would only pay about £1,000 a year if you paid for your own healthcare, even via the NHS. Whereas when you're super old, that's when your big problems start to come in. Not every 85-year-old needs £6,000 a year in health spending. Some of them need 300,000 and some of them need 100. But the net spending on average is about £6,000 a year, and if you come back to the UK after a life of working abroad, as long as you're a British citizen and you reside here, you do have to be a resident in the UK for tax purposes, as long as you are a resident here, which could just mean that you're getting your pension money every year, then we will give you some free healthcare, which is a hugely expensive thing anywhere else in the world. Even the developing world, once you get old, healthcare becomes expensive. And so as you can see, we've got this incentive structure set up where if you are working age and you will contribute to the system, and effectively where you would be overtaxed, you could argue, to pay for that healthcare, they are leaving the UK, whereas people above this age are coming into it. At least that's the thing that a lot of sources are trying to have you believe. The reason this is being shared mostly by right-leaning sources like The Spectator or The Times is, I think, because it's something that seems like a good stick to beat the government with, but if you actually look at the figures, the numbers aren't starkly increasing. Even though it sounds bad to have 109,000 British citizens leaving the country, more than returning, if we look back at our chart here, you can see that there has been two spikes in emigration, at least since the 1980s when we were really disastrously having everyone leave. But there's two big spikes in emigration. The first was during Brexit. A lot of EU citizens decided to leave. I guess maybe they wanted to live in the EU. I mean, if my borough seceded from London, because, Hounslow for the Hounslonesians, but if my borough decided to secede from London, then maybe I would move back into London by leaving my borough. That's what EU citizens did for a large proportion over here. And then the same thing is happening again, seemingly because of a slight increase in EU nationals, and indeed a slight increase in British nationals. This isn't a good thing, but it isn't dramatic. It's not that 109,000 more British citizens left compared to last year. It's just that every year for the last decade or so, we've been losing people of British origin, which is obviously going to happen when you think about it. Like, okay, if we aren't producing that many children here, and if we live in a free and democratic society, we don't live in East Germany, as long as we live in a free and democratic society, some number of British people are going to leave the UK, and that is entirely fine, except for the fact that they come back in when they get expensive, and for the fact that you can clearly see that young people do not see the appeal of the UK. which is something that I think we should maybe do something about. And so that is where the big question comes in today. Should we do something about that? Is that a concern? Or should we just say that actually it's entirely fine if if people think they can seek a better life elsewhere? That's good, because we can then have more spots for people coming into the UK to seek a better life. There's a giant cultural argument that, I'll be honest, I think a lot of people want to talk about, but not me. There's a giant cultural argument for why that's not a good idea, but let's instead try and talk about the facts. I think that if you live in most countries, I think if you are leaving the UK to go to the US, which a large number of people are, the thing that entices you is the fact that those countries do still have progressive taxation, but they have a progressive tax system that actually works for people. That is to say that you tax people as they get wealthier, kind of proportionally to it. This is a weird thing that people do not like to believe, but the US is a more progressive tax country than the UK. This is income tax in the US, as you can see. It caps out at 37%, but that's when you earn $578,000 a year, and this, I have to say this every time, that's marginal tax, so you only pay that 37% tax on income above $578,000. If you earn $600,000, you'd only pay 37% tax on the $22,000 above that amount. Okay, now we all understand marginal tax rates. Okay, so now compare that to the UK, where our tax rates, as you can see, look like this. Oh, this is not our tax rates in the UK. Our tax rates in the UK look like this. As you can see, we pay more than the US's top rate when you earn £50,270. That is literally 10 times less, is where we say, you are unbelievably wealthy, you are earning too much money, you are a part of the upper class gentry. I get comments on my videos being like, it's like, are you defending people earning more than 50k a year? And it's like, yeah, I don't want them to leave. I want them to pay. I would rather loads of people pay 39% tax or 37% tax than some number of people leaving because we're charging them 40%. I believe in tax maximalization, and that means that, I mean, like, if we're going to have taxes at least, right, and we believe that they're going to be good, which is a common belief in the UK, we should be trying to maximize tax, not as a percent on the individual, because we hate them being wealthy, but on the overall concept. This is something that Dan Needle, who is a left-leaning, I believe he was part of the Labour National Executive Committee, but this is one of the Labour people has come out here and said, we are taxing the wrong people because even both Labour and the Conservatives for the last decade have been ignoring the ultra-rich, and even the middle earners too, if we're being honest, but the almost rich are the people being taxed the most because aspiration is being taxed like crazy in this country. Look at that higher rate tax threshold that I just pointed out. In real terms, when it was first introduced in the 1990s, it sat at about £60,000 in today's money. It was, I think, 30 grand, 35 grand, something like that. And as it slowly got risen over time, you could see that there was a point where, yeah, we really intended it to be for people earning quite a bit. And then recently we've decided, yeah, people need to pay more money, and those people are the people earning 50k a year, our lowest in 2025 terms that it's ever been, which is kind of crazy. Like I just mentioned, and it means that there are an increasing proportion paying not our highest rate of tax. To be fair, we do actually have, I should have mentioned this, we have an even higher rate of tax than a lot of countries have, because we also have insurance contributions on top of that. But our higher rate, what is the majority of what the majority of higher earnings in the country pay, 40% is a very high band to be hit with very, very early on. And it means that now, instead of the top 7% of the country paying this tax, 18% of the country are paying what is meant to be our rich person tax. What percent of the US do you think are paying their what percent of the US are paying their 37% tax? I guarantee it's not 17%. That is the basic idea, right? Is that if you marginally would tax people less, more people would be excited. And honestly, you could even just say that, looking at how things work is right now, super wealthy people, the top 0.1%, are doing entirely fine. Because if you earn £2 million a year, it doesn't matter if the higher rate threshold is frozen at £50,000, but a consultant on 120k is. And even deeper, there's the idea that dividend tax has been super low. Council tax is super low. We have lots of taxes that, because we don't want to raise them or equalize them or do anything with, we've just been raising income tax, but specifically on that, what you might call, not the middle, because I think 50k is still the top 30-ish% of the UK, but like you're still talking about the fact that we are raising money on people who want to become wealthy. Something that a lot of people forget about when we talk about taxing money is that if you want to become wealthy, not high income-y, if you want to become wealthy, you need to earn income and convert that into wealth. I need to take my $578,000 a year, which, to be fair, I will lose like a third of that money, but I'll take the remaining $400,000 a year and I'll put it into savings. Or on a more realistic level, if I earned 50,000 in the US, or let's say 90,000, because I've got to pay for healthcare too, my 90,000, I want to take some of my remaining money and turn it into wealth. And if you are being taxed, you cannot do that. You can never have a wealth, which is a problem. And so this is the thing that I think is being, forgotten about by a lot of people, is that I talk a lot about how high UK tax revenue is, and I do need to point out that we're very high on a global level, but really low on a European level. But the reason that we're low is because, if you want to tax the wealthy, that is an easy way to get more money, but only a little bit. Even the most self-professed like pro-wealth tax people, this is tax justice, people who believe that taxes are always good and raising more of them is always good because it will bring about equality. This is the most left-leaning source I could find on the matter. They believe that if you have 6 wealth taxes, this is regular wealth tax, extra capital gains, extra national insurance, extra inheritance tax, or rather enclosing loopholes, reforming nom-doms, which we did actually already do, as well as introducing a tax on share buybacks. If we did all of those things, we would raise 50 billion. Just to remind you here, the amount we spend every single year on health is deeply quadrupled that. 50 billion would be enough for us to fund our defense budget for a year. It's less than we spend on debt interest. The amount that we can raise from wealth taxes, even from the most optimistic sources who assume that no one will leave the UK because patriotic millionaires stay and pay their taxes, there just isn't that wide of a tax base because we don't have that many wealthy people. It seems like we do because you can read about them a lot in the news, but there just aren't that many of them. Whereas every other country that actually gets, every other European country that has higher tax revenue, the secret, this is the thing that I guess people don't know about, the secret is you have higher taxes, not just overall, but specifically on middle earners and lower earners, I think are a thing here too. So instead of trying to cap around your top 30%, the median earners, so the people earning the average amount, if you line everyone up, £28,000 in the UK is what this says. This must be an old source. Please don't tell me this is new. No, it's new. It's 2021. Wow. But yeah, £28,000, the average earnings in the UK. I thought it was in the 30s. I thought we'd recently hit that amount, but clearly they're using 30,000 as their logic. So in the UK, if you earn 28,000, you only pay 11% income tax because you're paying a 20% marginal rate, but only on some of your money. You're paying a 7.8% employee, or your employer is paying that amount, and you're paying another 7%. Whereas if we compare that to Denmark, you would pay more than triple the income tax. But you get the Danish system, right? Everyone loves the Scandinavian system. Or indeed, if we just look at a country that has similar income taxes to us, like Spain, they have a much higher employer social security contribution. Or if you look at Germany, they have much higher employees and employers. You have to have some system where you tax people directly and concede that's what you're doing, or you tax people indirectly and pretend that that's not going to come out of their income. But in either case, in Europe, if you want to get these super generous welfare systems that many desire, you genuinely cannot get there solely by taxing the wealthy. You have to consider, weirdly enough, the average worker, which is one of the weird things the UK has refused to do because it's politically unpopular. So we go for wealthy people, but we are defining wealthy people as being increasingly low. Again, wealthy people at 70k a year, maybe you could argue, I think that is reasonable. If you have a paid-off house and you've got a paid-off car and you live in a low cost of living area, you have an insane amount of money on 70k a year. I think if you're a pensioner and you earn even half of that, you're living life good, right? If your expenses are super low. If you live in a high cost of living area, or if you are at the start of your career where you need to build up your wealth, being taxed at 40% on any additional work you do or any additional pay raises you get is something that is bad. And so some people will choose to, work-life balance it, which means depriving the government of tax revenue. Anytime that I decide I'm going to go to the boat lake rather than... I don't know if we have boat lakes in the UK. That's such an American example. Look at me. I'm American now. I do have to say that, anytime I choose to go to the, anytime I do any recreational activity that isn't working, not because I don't want to work, but because I think it's probably not worth it comparatively, I am depriving the government of tax revenue, and that is something that a government should not want to have happen. They should want it to be that you earn the maximum amount possible, because if they don't, then a large number of people will say, I think I'd rather live somewhere else. I don't think that most of these young people are leaving the UK directly because of tax policy, but I do think that when you see on social media someone going to Australia, doubling their salary and paying not as much tax, even on the doubled salary, as a percentage, then you go, huh, I could live a much better life comparatively, because even in a higher cost of living place, as long as it hasn't consumed all of your pay increase, I could go and live in a cool place, and I could go and earn a bunch more money, and then I could just come back to the UK when it became different. And I part of me looks at this and says, like, yeah, I think that the easy cap down on this would say to say, like, yeah, your NHS in old age should be dependent on whether you've actually worked in this country and contributed to it, because that I think that's like the easiest fix for it. But that's just an easy fix to say that all human beings are equal and there's no difference between being born here and not. I think the actual thing that should be looked at, the thing that should be fixed, is we should want young people to look at the UK and go, this would be an awesome place to build a career, to build a life, and to get wealthy in. You want wealthy people, even if you're a wealth tax person, right? If the more wealthy people, the more your wealth tax will raise. If you wealth tax people out of existence, then your 22 billion a year will become nothing. If you, this is, they even talk about the fact that, like, wealth tax is only 0.04%. That is, which is really good for optics, and it's really good because 99% of people can vote for it, saying it's not going to affect me. But if you want to have high taxes, you need to have some number of people paying those taxes. There are genuinely earners every year who earn more than $600,000. The number of earners in the UK earning more than £600,000 is pitifully low by comparison. And I think that you could even argue, like, okay, if we don't want to change our tax rates because we think that 50k is unfathomably wealthy, then what we should be doing, I think what you could argue is, like, okay, what if we reform our taxes? In the UK, you pay all of the tax, besides council tax, but you pay all of the tax on your house when you buy it. And that can be 15% if your house is over 500,000? No, it's not 15% over 500,000. Oh, it's got to be 5 million, right? It's 12% over 1.5 million. They've missed a zero. Terrible. But it's 12. You pay 12% of the value of property in cash to the government. Every day that you miss is genuinely a disaster. Like, your solicitor will not let you miss it because the penalties are so high. So you're talking about having to spend 120 grand up front for every additional £1 million on your property price, which you could argue, like, whatever, who's earning more than 1.5 million. But if you want to tax those people better, rather than taxing them, on a £2 million house, you pay like 150k in taxes. Rather than paying 150k in taxes once, do what America does and say, well, a £2 million house would attract somewhere between the lowest is going to be what over here in you could pay like 0.5% a year, so that would be about 10 grand a year, if I've done my maths right. You pay 10 grand a year in taxes. In 15 years, you make more money at 0.5%, or you go the Texas route, or the Illinois route, or even New Jersey route, 2% every year. You could charge them 40 grand a year to live in that house, and although that would probably be too high, and a lot of high-end houses would sell, the point is, even at the lowest American property tax rate, you would make more money over more than 15 years than the stamp duty land tax, unless people move more than every 15 years, and it would be fairer, and you would get more money out of people because it's much more liquid. The reason that I don't know, I guess what I'm saying here is we need tax reform. This is something that even again, quite semi-left-wing seeming people will say that, like, yeah, you should a £2 million banker should be closer to the top threshold than, effectively it makes no difference to him where it is because of how high above it is, where I think we should have a more progressive tax system, and we can, even without having to change the revenue numbers, we can raise it in fairer ways, and that would be really good for increasing the number of people coming into the UK. That's my pitch, at least. That's the pitch of Dan Needle, and it's the pitch of basically anyone who looks at this figure and says, is young people leaving the UK a good thing, or is it them who's the problem? It's probably them. And so that is why there is a problem. It's not a dramatic new problem, but it is an easy source. The amount of effort we have to put in to get an additional 100,000 taxpayers from abroad is probably less than the reforms that we could do to encourage young people to want to move here, to encourage people from the EU to want to stay here. And I think that is something that would be a good thing and would decrease our reliance on the world. Because ultimately, even if you love net immigration, you're reliant on the number of people in the world who want to come to the UK staying very high because you only want to take some percent off them. That even the most pro-immigration argument says, well, if we need immigration in this country, we should decrease the amount that we need just to replace the number of people leaving, right? And that's my argument for today. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you disagree with it, that's great. Let me know down below. And yeah, I had honestly, it's something I wanted to talk about. So if you don't like it, I don't care anyway. I had a great time. If you do like these sorts of fun geography and political videos, then you can support me on Patreon, and I will hopefully, you know, and then I will progressively pay a % of that to the government, and it'll be great. But or you could pay me and you could leave in the comments tax evasion, and legally I think I would have to not do that. Don't listen to this video, HMRC. I'm joking. Thank you for watching. I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you on Oxford Street. Yeah, look how real this image is. Okay, goodbye.